I'm here to answer the question, how to make brown stock and brown sauce. This is a very complex question, and it has a very complex answer. There's an old saying in cooking, the simpler the food, the more complex. Obviously, the making of a brown stock can appear to be very simple, and it is. I'm going to take you into the whole process of making brown stock and brown sauce in this video. This is probably the longest video in the entire index. There's 8 or 9 different categories of information that we're going to cover. It's going to include the selecting of the bones, the type of bones, how the bones are cut, how the bones are browned, how the vegetables and aromatics that go into the pot are cooked, what type of pot to select, the amount of food bones that should be proportionally in any size pot, how the pot itself is loaded, how the stock itself is brought to a simmer and cooked, and over what period of time, how it's skimmed, how it's nurtured and babysat throughout the entire cooking process. Then finally, after that process is completed, which usually takes 1.5 to 2.5 days, then the straining of the stock, and then the reducing of the stock into brown sauce, or what we call glace de viande in French cooking, which means in English concentrated brown stock. We're going to begin the process of learning how to make brown stock by walking you through the selection of all the bones that we have and the vegetables and how they're cut first. So let's go there now. The first step in making brown stock is understanding how to select the bone, or the type of bone, and why you would be selecting that bone over another bone to make the stock. Let's begin with the primary 2 bones that are used to make brown stock, which are beef and veal bones, and/or. Some people mix them together. Some people use exclusively beef bones. Some people use exclusively veal bones. There's a misguided notion in the cooking world that veal bones are better than beef bones. This is not correct, and the quality of the stock and the sauce is determined by the cook, not by the bone, whether it be veal or beef. One can make a great brown stock or brown sauce from beef bones or veal bones, or they can mix them together. So, in terms of beef bones, which is what we're going to demonstrate for you in this video, and we're going to talk about the veal bones also. The selection of the bone should be the pipe, which is also called the femur bone, and the knuckle bones. What I have in front of me right here are some examples of what those bones look like. These 3 here are the femur bones, or the pipe bones. They are also called the marrow bones. As you can see, there's marrow in the inside of these bones. And this, formerly, was a whole knuckle bone that's been cut in half. Now, there are other pieces of beef bones that one can incorporate into this, but the knuckle and the shin would be the primary bones used for making beef stock in the commercial market. If you went to buy bones and you wanted to buy a 10-pound box of bones or a 50-pound box, they typically would be divided and graded by the type of bone. Marrow bones would be the most expensive bones in the marketplace, and in terms of veal and beef bones, like that, for browning. Now, the size of the bone is very important, and I'll tell you why. You're going to brown all of your bones when you make the brown stock, and the amount of browned surface that's available on the bone to be browned will help determine, and mostly determine, the level of brown taste and brown color in the final stock and sauce. So, let's take, for example, let's take this bone here, which isn't cut up that much. This is a knuckle bone, okay? Now, this bone has X amount of brown surface on it, or brownable surface on it, excuse me. Now, if I cut this bone into 4 pieces, I create more brownable surfaces, which means in the final analysis, I'm going to have a browner stock and a browner sauce. Okay, so you don't want a big bone like that because you have less brownable surface, and therefore you'll have less brown flavor and brown color. Okay? So we begin by saying 1.5 to 3 inch pieces of bones, give or take, would be a good size to have your butcher cut the bones for you. Okay? Now, why would one select beef bones or veal bones in terms of the cooking time? There is a consideration there. Beef bones versus veal bones. Beef bones, which come from an older animal, and they are harder and more dense, take a longer amount of cooking time to extract the flavor. Beef bones typically take 2 full days to extract the flavor. Veal bones you can extract the flavor from in 1.5 days, but cooks typically cook them also for 2 days, but they don't absolutely have to, as in the case of the beef. One thing to keep in mind in general about the cooking of your bones, whether it be veal or beef, and that is that the flavor of the bones, the final flavors of the bones, are released in the last few hours of the cooking time of the stock. So if you take the stock off early, you may, even though you're shaving maybe 25% of the cooking time off, you could end up losing 50 to 75% of the flavor. So that, I think, covers the selection of the bones and how they're cut. And now we're going to take you across a table here that is full of bones, and we're going to begin the process of making a large pot. And I'm going to show you all the ingredients that are going to go into it, step by step. We're back to doing the bone processing for the brown veal or beef stock in brown sauce. One of the things I haven't mentioned to you so far, which is absolutely essential for you to understand about stock in general, is that stock is defined as flavored water. So all stock begins as water, and then we put things into the water and simmer them in the water, and the water takes on a flavor of whatever that is, and that's what the stock is. Okay? So we've talked about the selection of the bone, the cutting of the bone. Now I'm going to talk to you about how much bones to put in the pan. You only want to put enough bones in the pan, and as you see here, we have about 150 pounds of bones here. Of course, your recipe in the index, of course, is only for 10 pounds of bones, which should go into a 24-quart heavy aluminum gauge stock pot. So the reason you don't want them overloaded or piled is because you want them to be able to brown all the way around. If the heat cannot get in the pan by moving through the bones, it cannot brown the sides of the bone because it's being trapped by another bone. Okay? And you will, of course, during the roasting process, be turning the bones. Now, there's an additional option that the cook has in terms of making the bones browner than they normally brown naturally without anything added to them. And that is that one can take either oil or clarified butter and spray the bones with them prior to the browning process, prior to putting them in the oven to roast and brown. It will enhance the browning. Ultimately, we'll end up with a deeper brown and more brown flavor. And remember, the definition of good brown stock is how brown it is and how brown it tastes. Okay? So this is just one more element, which I don't always do myself when I'm making large amounts, but sometimes when I'm making small amounts, 10, 20 pounds of bones at a time, I may enhance them by spraying them with clarified butter or olive oil. So we'll spray this one, which I started with the olive oil. We'll see if it makes any difference, because you're going to see the entire process of all these bones being roasted, being turned in the ovens, being placed into the pots, having the water added to them, and the entire 2-day cooking process you're going to see in this video, time elapsed, of course, okay? So we're moving down here now. These are all, again, beef, shin, and knuckle and marrow bones that we have. We have about 150 pounds here. And we have celery, we have onions, we have carrots, and we have whole garlic. And we have bay leaves, we have dried leaf